So I just want to first thank Reverend Mpho Tutu, who is here today with us. We were very much hoping that Archbishop Desmond Tutu will be here with us today. And I must say, he tried very hard to do so, but he put his back out some days ago. So it's very difficult for him to travel from Cape Town to Vancouver. So I'm just delighted that his daughter, who is much better looking than the Archbishop, is here with us. The Archbishop, as you know, is 78 years old now, I think. And all his life, he really loves young people, and he loves loud music as well. And he loves dancing. And I have often told him that he should stop acting like a teenager and start behaving like a holy man. But of course he doesn't listen, so I think a couple of weeks ago he was dancing away and having a good time, and he put his back out. So we are just delighted that you are here today with us, Reverend Tutu. I'm so grateful that His Holiness the Dalai Lama is with us here today. I am still trying to come to terms with the idea that he is now here in Vancouver 3 times in 5 years. I think all of us in Vancouver, and even myself who live on Bowen Island rather than Vancouver, are really grateful to have His Holiness here the 3rd time in 5 years. And of course, now that he's an honorary citizen of Canada, he should be coming anytime he wishes. And I think that they still require him to have a visa to come here this time though. So I don't know about the honorary citizens. Your Holiness, the idea of this gathering started a few years ago when we had this conversation. And I remember you were not very pleased with me because you said to me that you come here and I talk a lot about the idea of compassion and making a difference in the world and so on, but that I do not really have the capability to actually translate these words into concrete action. So I think that you were hoping that I could do a better job. So I think that in this gathering, in the next couple of days, we have Your Holiness here, and we have some very compelling people from around the world who are much more capable than me. And I think that I'm hoping that this gathering here would allow the chance for all of us to put our ideas together and collaborate and actually find some way to translate the idea of compassion into very specific and concrete action that will make a difference to people around the world. So what I would like to do now is to show you a video of the Governor General of Canada, Michael Jean. She has created a video message for all of you. So if we are ready for the showing of the video, let's start it, please.
Your Holiness, Your Worship, Mr. Chan, distinguished guests, chers amis, c'eût été un honneur pour moi de me retrouver en votre compagnie. Vous qui brillez par vos actions éclairées et qui nous inspirez par vos idées des plus lumineuses. It would have been an honor to be in the midst of such a dazzling constellation of global change agents. Your presence in Vancouver is a glowing testament to Victor Chan's vision and his generosity of spirit, which were instrumental in making this gathering of hearts and minds possible. Like the brightest stars in the night sky, you help to guide us in our journey to a place where the human race finds joy in its common humanity and finds unity in its unconditional love for peace and justice. I can imagine that the concert hall must be humming with the prophetic melodies of hope, compassion, and togetherness. It would have been music to my ears, since I have always believed that international gatherings like these are crucial, because they encourage us to renew a spirit of peace within. They invite us to develop innovative solutions. They remind us that we can no longer work in isolation from one another. Le temps des solitudes est passé. Il est temps dorénavant de retrouver nos valeurs et nos aspirations communes. Il est temps de regarder le monde autrement, et j'oserais dire avec des yeux plus humains. Il est temps aussi de créer une feuille de route citoyenne pour la paix dans le monde. The time for solitude has passed. Now is the time to rediscover the values and aspirations we share. It is time to see the world through a new, dare I say, a more humane lens. It's time to create a new civic roadmap for world peace. Yes, daunting challenges lie ahead. Every day, women and men are slaughtered and maimed in armed conflicts. Every hour, young women are submitted to extreme forms of sexual terror. Every minute, children are forced into armed combat, sexual slavery, or even drug dealing by criminal groups. Faced with these heart-wrenching realities, it is easy to seek solace in the opium of defeatism, fatalism, and indifference. For a feeling of powerlessness can dampen our sense of moral duty. It can numb our determination to act, and it can lull our capacity to empathize. That is why it is imperative that we inoculate ourselves with the planetary resolve to resist the everyone for themselves and their clan mentality. To reject the spurious claims of an imminent clash of civilizations, to quell the insidious forces of sectarianism and fundamentalisms of all stripes. Luckily, we are not alone on this journey. For every person in the room stand thousands, if not millions, of people around the world who, in the shadow of anonymity, are risking everything to chip away at the walls of hatred, indifference, and fear that plague their communities. Here, I must pay a special tribute to the women around the world who are defying the odds to make a rousing ode to peace and justice in their conflict-ridden communities. Because women are conscious that life is our most precious asset. They are prepared at any cost to mobilize and take action for their children and for humanity. No one anywhere can afford to exclude women in any campaign for peace. Excluding women is a recipe for failure. That is why I'm pleased to see that the inclusion of women will be at the heart of your deliberations. You have a unique opportunity to dream big, to join your strengths, and most importantly, to transform your ideas into concrete action for change. Please be inspired. The world is counting on you. Peace is within our grasp. I thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Now I have the great pleasure of introducing a very old friend of mine for many years. He is Tom Beach, the president of the Fetzer Institute in a rather strange town called Kalamazoo. The Fetzer Institute is, in my mind, one of the most compelling, most interesting, and also most unusual institution in the US, because their whole mandate is to foster something that is rather difficult to grasp and a bit nebulous. Their whole idea is to promote the idea of loving kindness and forgiveness. So this is one of those rare institutions that is speaking to all of us through the foundation of our own psychology as well as our spiritual roots. And they have dedicated all their programming, their effort towards achieving and fostering love and forgiveness among all of us. So I think Tom Beach is here, and I believe that he has some money to give away also in the next little while. Tom Beach of Fetzer Institute.
Thank you, Victor. I just celebrated my 70th birthday about 2 weeks ago, so I'm a little sensitive about being referred to as your old friend. Victor is my young friend. It's a great pleasure, and we are delighted and grateful to be part of this important Peace Summit. And we're glad that we can be here with all of you. I want to begin by saying good morning. Oh boy. If the Archbishop were here, he would say, "Oh, come friends, you can do better than that." So let's try it again. Good morning. Good morning. Now we're getting somewhere. The next 30 minutes will be a time of great joy. We will recognize the life and work of two extraordinary people, and we also have the opportunity to reconnect with the power of love and forgiveness in our own lives. From the beginning of our thinking about the Fetzer Prize for Love and Forgiveness, we knew that we should honor people whose very lives stand for love and forgiveness. We wanted this prize to recognize people who live with the reality of fear and violence, and yet are inspiring examples of both the promise and the power of love, forgiveness, and compassion. We consulted many people from all over the world, asking them who would they nominate for such a prize, and two names stood out in every single conversation: His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Emeritus Desmond Tutu. Thank you, Your Holiness, for being with us today. We know how much your friend Archbishop Tutu wanted to be here in person to share this time with you. But as Victor mentioned a few minutes ago, he's suffering from a painful back injury. I'm not going to hazard a guess as to whether it comes from dancing, but I know it's painful, and it's left him unable to travel for several weeks. But we're truly delighted that the Archbishop's daughter, Reverend Mpho Tutu, is with us today to accept the prize on her father's behalf. It's wonderful to see you again. Before we make the formal presentation of the prize, we'd like to show you a short video tribute from a few friends and fellow Nobel laureates.
They are an explosion of joy. They are an explosion of enthusiasm, happiness, of great love. These persons give us immense enthusiasm. They radiate great inspiration. They joke, they laugh.
I've lost count of the numerous times that I've been with His Holiness. In fact, we joke a lot together now because he loves Irish jokes. And the last time I was in Dharamsala with us, we were doing a peace jam there with him. I said, you know, Your Holiness, it's about time you married me. Oh, this is beautiful, belly loving. I think I need someone a little younger.
I always see a positive energy in Desmond Tutu. He is a very happy person.
همونطوری که گفتید
As you know, he has a sense of humor.
He says that the secrets to winning the Nobel Peace Prize is to have an easy pronounced name, to have a big nose,
You must have a large nose.
and to have sexy legs.
That's him.
I take issue with his issue about his legs. I wouldn't call them beautiful. In Bali, I saw him in shorts and a rain slicker tied around his head. I would not think he'd be a cover boy for GQ in that outfit. He looks fabulous in anything else, however.
Well, that's my Desmond. I mean, I absolutely adore him. For me, he's a wee spiritual bubble. He just goes around landing on people, you know. And they honestly don't know what's hit them. He has a profound spirituality. Something that I would love to achieve someday. I want what he's got. I want his kind of deep understanding of the world and what makes it tick.
What I admire about Desmond Tutu is that he cut the circle of violence in South Africa, because this circle had to be cut.
The Dalai Lama is a person with great humanitarianism. He has a profound spirituality. He continues to be a voice for the right of the Tibetan people to their land, their religion, their lives. And despite all that, the Dalai Lama opened a space of understanding at the international level with other people, with other religions. He is a man who's trying to unite the human family.
When all that awfulness was happening to his Buddhist monks, and I wrote him a letter and I said, I want I dream someday of you walking into your own country with a great big smile on your face. We owe him that. The world owes him that.
So I associate them with light, their light that they extend to the rest of us, the light of their eyes, because they are people who point the way. They show us the way.
But I learned through people like His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Desmond what pure love is, where you ask nothing back for what you give, and they just give and give and give.
Brothers, we are walking the same road. We are trying to build and share peace among all people. You are representatives of that whole spirit and that whole struggle for a better world. A world that is more just, more humane, and more fraternal for all. So I send you a warm embrace for peace and goodness.
Because I know that Archbishop Tutu is watching us this morning through our live stream on the web, I will address both of our Fetzer Institute Prize, both recipients directly. For more than 50 years, each of you has faced with great courage a world that is weary from being in the grasp of fear and violence. In the face of disruption, you have brought calm. In places of violence, you bring peace. In times of fear, you offer love. And into an atmosphere of bitterness and hostility, you bring forgiveness. You do this day by day, year by year, with steadfastness, with grace, humility, and humor. You come from different places in the world, and you each celebrate your own religious traditions. And yet you show us how to honor and respect people of all faiths and beliefs. You model this through your lovely friendship with one another and through the way you work together, supporting one another, accompanying one another on the very difficult journeys you have chosen. You have helped awaken hope in the lives of people everywhere. Hope for a way of living that overcomes fear and violence. And you call us to find this way of being together also. You have shown us that we all can love one another. Indeed, we must do this. You have shown us that we all can forgive one another. Indeed, we must do this also. So on behalf of the Fetzer Board of Trustees and on behalf of a grateful world, it is a great joy to present the Fetzer Prize for Love and Forgiveness to His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Emeritus Desmond Tutu. very grateful that in spite of the pain of his back injury, when the Archbishop was certain that he could not be here in person, he recorded a video greeting for us all. Here it is.
Dear friends, may I apologize abjectly for not being with you in Vancouver. I was so much looking forward to being there with you, to being there with my dear friend, His Holiness the Dalai Lama. But here I am with the help of modern day technology. I can greet you from South Africa in place of being able to greet you in person. And may I also say a big thank you to Mpho Institute for awarding me jointly with His Holiness this wonderful gift that they are giving us, the prize for what? Forgiveness and compassion. You know, sometimes one has wondered how people could ever think that God is a Christian. You know how they seem to suggest that even someone as wonderful as the Dalai Lama is, one of the holiest people I've ever come across, that somehow you think that when he goes to heaven, God will say, "Oh, Dalai Lama, you are a wonderful guy. What a shame you are not a Christian." Really, I can't imagine that would happen. And so, friends, we have gathered together as those who acknowledge that the Spirit of God is one that is wider than any one particular faith. And thank you, in a world where religion has often been used almost diabolically to encourage all kinds of awfulnesses, xenophobia, homophobia, all of these ghastly things. But today you are gathered really to celebrate the fact that the world is reaching out for holiness, reaching out for forgiveness, for compassion, because each one of us, deep down in their hearts, we know that goodness actually matters. We know in our hearts that many of our problems stem from our disregard of these noble virtues, the capacity to forgive, the capacity to be reconciled, the capacity for caring for our fellow human beings. And I maybe be preempting, but Mpho Institute would want us to announce that they want to support a global gathering which would happen in 2012. The venue and the precise dates have not yet been determined, to be co-chaired by His Holiness and myself, where we are calling on universities, politicians, governments. We're calling on the media, the arts, sport. We're saying we were able to work together to promote compassion in a world that has been notorious for its violence and its treatment of others as if they were of little worth. It would be a gathering where you would have representatives of all of these sectors of our common life to speak about forgiveness, to speak about reconciliation, to speak about compassion. And yes, I mean, you know, I have seen in so many parts of the world a great deal of awfulness, but I've also seen examples of wonderful human beings. I mean, we go to a Darfur and you see the awful circumstances under which the internally displaced persons live, the refugees, and yet you tell a joke, and these people living in those ghastly circumstances can laugh, and you see there are men folk, Muslims in spotless robes, that there is a resilience in humankind, and looking at the humanitarian workers, many of whom come from countries where they could live in peace, they could live without fear of being abducted, and here they come. Several of them coming many times over to work in situations where they are at risk. Women, humanitarian workers, often running the risk of being abducted or being raped. And you say, yeah, clearly we are made for goodness, and this global gathering would be one where we want to be reminded that war, poverty, violence, no, those are not the whole picture, the whole story about us. In fact, they are aberrations. That it is goodness, it is love, it is compassion, it is caring, it is those wonderful things that each one of us knows in the depth of their hearts for which we are made. And so, God bless you. God bless you as you share with one another profound thoughts. I will uphold you in my prayers. God bless you.
Reverend Tutu, would you like to add something on your father's remarks?
I know that my father would have dearly loved to be here today. You noticed in the video that he was slightly subdued, which is not characteristic. I think the affect is something like the 8-year-old boy who's been told that he's not going to have a birthday party. So he is genuinely feeling very sorry for himself because he would have loved to have been with two of his favorite people in the world, Your Holiness and Tom, and he also gets to miss out on hanging out with his grandchildren, so he really is feeling exceedingly sorry for himself. But I bring on his behalf, we spoke this morning, I bring on his behalf the warmest greetings to you and fond greetings to you, and thanks to each of you who are present today as part of this audience and as part of the panels that will be present as the day goes on. Thank you.
Your Holiness, will you share your thoughts with us, please?
Firstly, thank you. So you choose me, give the prize. So thank you very much. And then firstly, as I mentioned to you, I very much miss your father, an elder spiritual brother, very nice person. In the past, many occasions, sort of gathering, Nobel Laureate gathering. As soon as he joined, then the whole atmosphere become very pleasant. Like that. But sometimes his eye pierces to me when he seriously teased me that his eye is something very round and like that. So certainly I wish he recover soon and wish that he carry his normal, I think, a meaningful life and serving to humanity and particularly those needy people. So, then, the idea is that he mentioned some sort of meeting, a gathering by the leaders. Yes, certainly it is very important. Now, what we are talking, importance of compassion, love, forgiveness, meant for 6 billion human beings. So I always believe the real change must start from individual, then family, then community. Then, of course, the leaders also sometimes they have to think the immediate sort of importance. And sometimes it seems that they are not looking more holistic. So there are sort of immediate sort of problems. They are much sort of concerned about that. So therefore, it is useful to have that kind of gathering and reminds these leaders the importance of forgiveness or love or compassion. And also I feel now today, the reality is that whole 6 billion human beings become like one human family, one group. In previous time, African remain Africa, we Asian remain in Asia, the Middle East or Europe, Latin America. You see, each more or less, I think, self-sufficient, and remain like that. Not much contact with the outside world, and their real life not necessary. You see, depend on other. But today's reality is completely changed. Every continent, you see, their life very much depend on their prosperity, very much depend on rest of the world. So according to that new, and then on top of that, environment issue. So the national boundary, I think global economy, and then environment issue in this field, national boundary is meaningless. So therefore, we really need the concept of the whole world consider as a we, part of me. I think that's very important. I believe once we consider rest of the world as a part of we, part of me, then I think the very basis of conflict, very basis of hatred and cheating, bully, no longer there. Consider other as a part of we, part of me. Then I think the reality also like that, as I mentioned earlier, the entire world had to be interdependent like that. So therefore, they supposed to see those leaders should teach us. But sometimes it is necessary. Teach them from the public. That also I think sometimes necessary. So maybe, you see, that kind of gathering may contribute their bigger awareness, bigger vision like that. And then he also touched about media. That's also very, very important. I always telling when I meet, you see, the media people, I usually telling them they should have long nose, like elephant nose. Then you see they should smell in front and also behind. That's very important. Everybody should try in the front and the face, everybody try to nice, isn't it? But what is going on behind, that's very, very important to know. So therefore, the media people, firstly, should investigate every field, well, in religious field or any field, and then should tell public what is going on. That's number one. Provided must be very honest, very truthful, no matter what sort of financial help come. Doesn't matter, but their real sort of responsibility is telling truth and make clear about the reality. That's the one. Then second, as Bishop touched, the media as a sort of, for news, those sensational things become more dominant. That's also good. But too much, always carrying that way, then sometimes viewer or the people sort of get some kind of impression that we humanity is something negative. And that eventually, because of the disgust to oneself. And often you see people, sometimes it's a question, to me, is such we human being, or human future is more doomed. Because of, they got the impression, oh, world full of problem. The human being is more violent type. But actually not. I think as a result of act of anger, killing, or beating, of course, we can count number. But people who receive help out of compassion, out of care, I think millions. But these, see, the people consider, people take for granted. So, not become news. So therefore, media people should sort of should give the impression to the people there are such negative things there. But at the same time, we also have the potential or ability to reduce these things, so in form of article or some form of discussions or seminar. I think that. I think as Bishop Tutu mentioned, I fully agree. In any way, as I mentioned earlier, my elder spiritual brother, I consider him, so whatever he say, I will support.
I think it's wonderful to hear from both of you that this work, this evolution that we're looking for must come from multiple places in our world, from leaders, heads of organizations, heads of institutions, but also from within each one of us. And that's why the combination of the global gathering in 2012 with the many, many efforts that are underway in so many parts of the world to bring compassion and love and forgiveness to the center of life are so important. We'll hear this afternoon of just one of these that's emerging called the Charter for Compassion. It's a project, a very remarkable project designed by Karen Armstrong, and you'll hear more about that this afternoon. But the global gathering focuses, the idea of a global gathering focuses on leaders. The Charter for Compassion focuses on all of us as leaders. Again, thank you very, very much, both of you, and Archbishop, wherever you are. We'll now move into the panel discussion for this morning, but I want to again thank you on behalf of the Fetzer Institute. Thank you very much. Thank you.
So we will now begin the next part of the program, which is the panel discussion with His Holiness and Mpho Tutu. And the moderator of this discussion is Sir Ken Robinson, who is one of the most brilliant innovators in education of our time. Some of you may have seen his presentation on TED.com, which was watched by millions of people around the world. And I must say that even my little daughter downloaded that presentation on her iPod. And I should tell you that this is the only presentation she ever downloaded on her iPod. The rest, is all music and stuff like this. So here's Sir Ken Robinson and the panelists who will be in this conversation. Sir Ken Robinson.
I'd just like to underline what Victor said about my brilliance. I was going to make the same point, actually, but now I don't need to. Welcome. It's a great privilege, I think, for me to be here in the presence of His Holiness and the other panel members. We have about an hour to solve this whole issue of world peace. So what we'll talk about for the rest of the time, I don't know, honestly, but we'll spin it out in some way. I will welcome the panel in just a minute. There's that old maxim about if you were to organize the best dinner party in the world, who would you have there? Well, they're here, I feel. There's such richness and wisdom on this platform. And in the panel too, I have to say. I mean, some of them are pretty good. But you know, we meet at a very particular time in the course of human affairs. Some of the issues of world peace are really as old as humanity, and we might have discussed them at any point, at any time in human history. You know, they're to do with the relationship of compassion and conflict, of love and hatred, and how these balance out in our affairs. They're to do with the balance of creativity and destruction. And all human beings have contributed enormously on either side, in a way, of these polarities. I believe with Archbishop Tutu that people are fundamentally good. I live in California now. That's not why I think this, by the way, but I do live in California. And I think there's an extraordinary inversion somehow. We've all become used to the idea that there is a crisis in the world's natural resources. There is. We are in severe danger of destroying the atmosphere on which we depend. But there is also a crisis in the world's human resources. I believe this fundamentally, that very few of us fundamentally understand the depth of our possibilities. And that's often to do with how we're educated, it's to do with the conditions under which we live, and it's to do with our own expectations. So this conversation for the whole conference and for this next hour is about the relationship of those two things. It's about the relationship between world peace and personal peace. But I say we meet at a particular time, and we do. We're meeting in the first decade of the 21st century, where I believe we are faced with revolutionary circumstances. There are challenges now that we face which go beyond any of those we've faced before, the challenge to natural resources. We live in a world approaching 7 billion people. That's unique in the whole of human history, and that has really come about in the past 30 years. We live in the world of extraordinary technological opportunities and risk. And we live in a world in a way which sits either side of a divide, generationally. I want to ask His Holiness about this a little later on. But let me illustrate it. How many of you here are over the age of 25? I thought so. Even in this light, if you don't mind me saying so. How many of you are under the age of 25? Okay, so that's not the question. The question is, those of you over the age of 25, can you put your hands up if you're wearing a wristwatch? A wristwatch. Anybody on the panel wearing a wristwatch? Now, what? I thought so. I was waiting. I thought so. Even though your wisdom is timeless, what happens in a time of revolution is that things we take for granted turn out not to be true. And we take many things for granted that are not true. This is just an illustration. How many of you who wore the watch today thought about that this morning? Were you agonizing about it? about whether I should put the watch on or not? Were you pacing up and down in some kind of pall of anxiety? You just do it, don't you? How many of you here under the age of 25 are wearing a wristwatch? There you go. 2. Now, this illustrates something important. Our kids don't wear wristwatches. They don't wear wristwatches because they live in a world that's being revolutionized by digital culture. And for them, the time is everywhere. It's on their iPhones, their iPods, their laptops. They relate differently to each other because of these intermediaries. I have 2 children, James and Kate, who are both here today. Neither of them wear wristwatches. They don't see the point. As they said to me, why would you wear like a separate device to tell the time? like it's a one-function device, you know. You know, like how lame is that? And I said, no, it tells the date as well, you know. So there are particular circumstances that we face. Technological change at a speed that's never before been encountered, which makes us more connected, in some ways also more distanced, I believe. The strain on the Earth's resources, which is unprecedented, and there are more of us. And the scale of human conflict doesn't seem to be receding, so far as we can judge. So I wanted just to set that context and to invite the panel to reflect with us about some of these issues. It's the opening session of the symposium, so we wanted to try and set a frame. It's a kind of overture to issues that will be discussed in more depth during the course of the next few days. Let me quickly introduce the panel. I don't think I need to introduce His Holiness. I think anybody whose name starts with "the" don't you feel? I think we can take that on the nod, really, can't we? Yes. But His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Matthieu Ricard, or Matthieu Ricard, I should say, who I'm sure all of you will know, is a Buddhist monk, an author, a translator, a photographer. What's so interesting about Matthieu is he earned a PhD degree in cell genetics at the renowned Institut Pasteur under the Nobel Laureate Francois Jacob. He's a board member of the Mind and Life Institute, an organization dedicated to collaborative research between scientists and Buddhist scholars and meditators. His latest book, The Art of Meditation, has sold over 120,000 copies during its first 3 months. And it's been featured in all the major magazines and television shows in France. With his father, he wrote an extraordinary book called The Monk and the Philosopher. And Matthieu, I think, uniquely sits astride the Western and Eastern traditions. Pierre Omidyar, who we're delighted to have with us, is the co-founder and founding partner of Omidyar Network, an entrepreneur who's greatly influenced by his beliefs in the inherent potential of all people and the transformative power of markets. Because a lot of what we want to talk about are mechanisms of change, and we want to talk about how the markets may affect that. These beliefs inspired Pierre to found eBay in 1995, which I have to say, Pierre, was a good idea. The rest of us were so close to that idea, weren't we? We had a garage sale at home, but it didn't, you know. Pierre starts from the premise that people are basically good and created a platform that enabled people to connect over shared interests and build individual businesses. After eBay became a public company in 1998, Pierre and his wife Pam co-founded the Omidyar Foundation to support non-profits. So I think a really important voice in this conversation. Eckhart Tolle, who I'm sure you all know, is a spiritual teacher and author born in Germany and educated at the universities of London and Cambridge. He's the author of the #1 New York Times bestseller, The Power of Now, which is translated into 33 languages, and the highly acclaimed follow-up, A New Earth, which are widely regarded as 2 of the most influential spiritual books of our time. Eckhart's profound yet simple teachings have helped countless people throughout the world find inner peace and greater fulfillment in their lives. Something I want to ask Eckhart about is that he was assisted in this by not going through formal education. He left school at the age of 13 and never went back. And here he is. Beautiful book, badly spelled. Beautiful book. You know Reverend Tutu through her own work and through the work of her father. I want to mention a few things that haven't featured yet in the introduction. She is an Episcopal priest, the founder and executive director of the Tutu Institute for Prayer and Pilgrimage. She studied and taught in Grahamstown, South Africa, at the College of the Transfiguration, the Provincial Episcopal Seminary of Southern Africa. With a grant from the Episcopal Evangelical Education Society, she initiated a pastoral care ministry for rape survivors and their families. Reverend Tutu now serves as assisting priest at Holy Comforter Episcopal Church in Washington, D.C., and is chairperson emeritus of the board of the Global AIDS Alliance. So she follows in the extraordinary tradition of her father, and we're just delighted that you're here with us. I'm going to encourage the panel to have a conversation around three broad themes. First, because I think it's important we have some bearings on our conversation. We're here to talk about world peace, but what do we really mean by that? Do we all have the same view of what world peace is? What sort of vision do we have? Do we see this as a world of non-violence? Is it a world where there is no conflict? Is it a world where wealth is distributed evenly? Is it a world of religious unity or homogeneity? Or is it one of diversity? So what's our vision for this? Secondly, I want us to talk a little bit about the idea of personal peace. There are some different views around the table, I think, of what constitutes personal peace and how that relates to global peace. And finally, since we are here to try and move the agenda forward, I'd like us to focus before we're done on what should be done. What actions can we take? Now, we're not going to solve all of this before 10:30, but I do hope we'll give you an agenda of issues to talk about with yourselves and in the sessions that come and provide a frame for it. But I would really very much like, on your behalf, if His Holiness will allow me, to invite him just to say a few words about his vision of global peace, because I know he has a particular vision of that, and it's his vision in a way that's brought us together. I'm going to ask him to forgive me too by saying that I worked out that if we all speak, we'll have about 5 minutes each. So I'm going to encourage everybody to be pithy and epigrammatic. And as you're all wearing watches, there's no excuse. So, Your Holiness, if I may ask you, could you share some thoughts with us on your central vision of world peace, and how close do you think we are to achieving it?
Peace, I think firstly, every living thing, including trees, these things, and also animals, I think everyone have the right to exist and grow. So, in order to survive, in order to further grow, the peace is very important. Peace means this is the destruction. I think peace is the opposition of the destruction. Then we human being, or living being with feeling, then peace is even more important. Peace gives inner joyfulness. So not only just a survival, but also in the mind, there's a much sort of comfort, much sort of joyfulness. Then what is the meaning of peace? Peace, in the terms of living being, or being who have the experiences. And peace, not just a mere absence of violence or disturbances, but peace is something there is possibility of conflict, but deliberately avoid and use the method in order to solve the problem through peaceful means. So that is, I think, real peace. So peace and dialogue, spirit of dialogue, spirit of reconciliation and forgiveness, these, I think, should go together, as I feel. Peace cannot achieve through wish or through prayer or even through meditation. And now here's what world peace means. So peace does not mean no longer any problem. Problem always there. So we must find ways and means without using violence, solving these problems. That's the, I think, world peace means. So now here, the important is we need willpower, determination. For that, of course, there are many factors. Now, this is willpower means is related with mind. So, firstly, I feel compassion. This is sense of caring, sense of sense of concern of others' well-being. Number one. Number two, more awareness of the reality. So I think these two things are important. Awareness means if you use violence, you may get some satisfaction for temporary, but the very nature of the violence is unpredictable. So once you committed violence, then unexpected sort of consequences often happen. So knowing that, and then restrain, using harm, using violence. So that is the awareness, help, immense help, you see, to reduce violence. Then second, compassion, sense of well-being of others, sense of concern of others' well-being. Violence means harm, pain, suffering. So that's my view. So ultimately, peace, world peace, very much related with inner peace. Through inner peace, then you can develop world peace. But world peace now means here, firstly, individual person should have more inner peace. Then that person, whenever face some conflict, you see, try to solve that through non-violent way, through peaceful means. First, family level, then community level. Through that way, I think there is possibility. Once, you see, we create such a sort of compassionate sort of community, or the family, then next generation come from that kind of society, I think can be more compassionate, more sensible person. So at this moment, I think you also mentioned technology. Sometimes you see, we too much sort of emphasis on technology. In the field of technology, no room of compassion. Compassion is part of emotion. Technology, I think technology may have some kind of smart brain, but no capacity to produce compassion. Even you used to show your kindness, your affection to those sophisticated machine. The machine, no ability to respond to your affection. So we eventually, I think our way of thinking itself becoming something like mechanized, right? Mechanical. then there is no room about compassion. That, I think, perhaps as you ask those younger people, I think maybe they have whole sort of interest, whole mind, paying on because of that technology, these things. Then and then with belief, with technology, all your requirement can fulfill. Just mere technology and money.
I think that Pierre may have an opinion about this. Is my microphone on? Yes. All right, good. I'm going to ask Pierre in a moment, if I may, to comment on whether you think technology is also a force for good. But may I ask you, Eckhart, and I'll come to Reverend Tutu if I may, what's your view what's your vision of world peace? When we use that phrase, what comes to your mind? Not a world free of conflict, as we've heard, maybe, but...
There is an essential goodness and sanity in every human being, no matter how insane their outward behavior may be. If you look at the history of the 20th century, I wrote in a book that 100 million human beings had been killed by other human beings in the 20th century, but I was wrong. I was told that it's closer to 200 million human beings killed by other human beings in the 20th century alone. So, despite the fact that there is an essential goodness in each human being, there is also an overlay of madness, a dysfunction in the human mind. So we need to recognize the nature of that dysfunction. That dysfunction prevents us from recognizing, from perceiving other human beings and nature as part of who we are. The dysfunction that is part of the human mind, it's structural, it's built into the human mind, but it doesn't have to be there forever, it can change, is the inability to see the other as one with who I am. The oneness of life, the vision of the oneness of life is lost. And then the illusion of separation arises. Separation between one human being and the other human being. Separation between one nation and another nation, one religion, another religion, even within the religion, one sect against another sect. Separation of humans and nature, so you treat nature as a commodity rather than realizing that nature is as alive as you are and as sacred as you are. So not being able to sense the aliveness and the sacredness in every life form is the illusion. And this illusion creates this world of non-peace. So we have the mind, the continuously judging and conceptualizing mind, the voice in the head, I call it. It never stops. The moment you meet somebody, it judges, it imposes concepts. You cannot relate to another human being without a screen of conceptualization. Immediately you call him something. If you're a Democrat in the United States, you say, I believe in compassion. Now, whether you actually truly believe in compassion is determined when you meet a Republican. Because the moment you meet a Republican, you have the concept, oh, he's a Republican, he supported Bush for 8 years. So suddenly the compassion is gone. Because you cannot see that underneath the Republican there is a human being.
Which Republican was this? I want to bring you back into this in a moment. Reverend Tutu, one of the concerns I know your father had is that the post-apartheid South Africa, hasn't fulfilled many of the expectations that I think he had for it. It's still, you know, a scene of conflict and of division, as I understand it. I'm not saying that that's your view necessarily, but you come from an area of the world where conflict is well known. What's your view of the state of peace that we might be aspiring to?
I believe that peace is the opportunity for all to flourish. The opportunity not to live in the absence of conflict, but even in the presence of conflict, to accord respect and dignity to those whom we regard as other, those whom we regard as being across the aisle from us, those whom we regard as being outside the scope of our opinion, and those who we are stretched to love, stretched to feel compassion for. I recognize that South Africa is a country that is still experiencing some turmoil, some growing pains. But our democracy is new. We're 10 years old. Look at England. How many years have they had to practice? And I mean, were you to consider America 10 years after the establishment of American democracy, the upheaval is not a huge surprise. We're learning how to do this. We're not learning fast enough. Our hope has by far outpaced our ability to achieve peace, flourishing for everyone in our population, particularly flourishing for women. One of the concerns that women always have is a concern for safety, for bodily integrity. And that's not uniquely a woman's concern, but it is very much a woman's concern. And so I think the quest for peace and the quest for flourishing looks slightly different from a woman's perspective than it may from a man.
What does the vision of world peace call to your mind?
When Eckhart said that sometimes we just don't simply recognize that potential for goodness. I remember a wonderful 90 years old Jesuit father, Pierre, who took care of 50,000 kids in South India for many years. Once I met him in Paris, he was coming out of the subway, and he said, "People are so beautiful, but they don't know it." It was so moving. And then I think this is sort of lack of confidence that there is something there in our basic human nature. There is a potential for compassion. And underestimating that potential is possibly the biggest drama, the potential for change. And we know it is possible in a physical level. I have a 63-year-old friend, professor in Montreal. He started jogging again 2-3 years ago. He could hardly jog for 5 minutes without panting for breath. Now he ran a marathon a week ago. So he had that potential, but without bringing it to the surface, it's just useless. So if we want a more compassionate society, what is compassion? It's care, benevolence, altruistic love, concern for others. It starts from within. Now, if you want a global situation like that, you cannot expect that you'll have a beautiful garden by putting many, many flowers which are withered and dry. Every flower has to be fresh. So, although we need a kind of structure, we need outer peace, but if it doesn't start by ourselves, where do we go? So when we say, oh, a time of war, when there's so much violence, how can you just bother with inner peace? You know, it's like a luxury. But also war, it starts with a thought of hate. And as the Buddha said, if hate replies to hate, it will never end. So peace also starts with few people who say, that's enough. Let's break the cycle of violence. And so also non-violence, which is one characteristic of peace. People think, you know, inner peace, non-violence, sort of sweet ideas, sort of weak and passive. I think it takes more courage for a Burmese monk, barefoot, to stand in front of the Burmese army than for someone to cowardly put a bomb in a car bomb, for instance. So non-violence has more courage. And so let's not underestimate that potential for change. Let's not think it really, and also think that if others don't start, why should I? That's a loser formula. If we don't start, who will? And also we should be so enthusiastic that it doesn't matter if no one starts for a while. Somehow it will happen. It will happen then in ourselves, in the family, in the village, it will spread. And without that, we're just some kind of laziness. We concede defeat before crossing the starting line.
I'm going to come to Pierre in just a second, but one of the observations that His Holiness has made is that many of the conflicts that you've been most concerned about have arisen in the industrialized world. And you made a conscious choice, didn't you, to move from, so to speak, the Western scientific tradition to an Eastern tradition. Can you say a word or two about why that was and what you find in this tradition that you've embraced that was lacking in the one that you left behind?
Well, lacking, I don't know, but I was so fortunate when I was young to meet, people consider us great genius, philosophers, poets, thinkers, artists. My mother was a painter, my father was a philosopher. When I was 16, I met Stravinsky, so I had these extraordinary opportunities. Now, I could find wonderful people and very, bad-tempered, unkind people in all walks of life. You get 100 gardeners, you get sweet gardeners, grumpy gardeners. Same with philosophers, same with mathematicians, no correlation. Now, a good human being cannot, or a good spiritual teacher, if you say so, cannot be, angry, jealous, and all that. That doesn't work. There's no adequation. So when I met great spiritual teacher, like His Holiness and my teachers at that time, there was the messengers become the message. So at that time, I didn't care too much about the content of how did they know and how much learned they were in Buddhism. There's the extraordinary quality of a human being say, well, here there's something I can learn. Here is someone who showed me what I could become with some kind of effort. So that was really the source of inspiration, is the living example.
I want to come back to this just as the conversation progresses, but Pierre, we've heard some reservations about technology, which are mainly your fault, from what I can tell. So here's your chance to apologize publicly for it.
Okay.
But I know that you have a different view of this, that technology is also a powerful force for transformation.
Yes.
Can you say a word or two about that and what's the basis of your conviction?
Yes. First, I have to say that I am terribly honored and humbled to be part of this gathering. I also feel like it's a little bit due to my lucky day, because the first two people that Victor asked were unavailable. So here I am, late minute ad. Is there a funny kind of echo when I'm talking, or is that just? No. Okay. It's technology. You never trust technology. You know, when I created eBay almost 15 years ago, I started it on the notion that people were basically good. And I wanted to create a place using technology where people could come and meet other people who shared their interests and do business with one another. Now, in order to do business with one another, they had to get to know each other enough to trust one another. Because eBay wasn't saying, you can trust us. eBay was saying, let me introduce you to someone else, and you can trust that person. And so that was really the beginning of using technology to bring people together in a way that they could really get to know one another, find out how they shared their interests, and actually learn. It was very striking in the early days. I remember sitting down with some of our early customers, and one of them, it was for the very first time, one of them was a truck driver, someone who drove across the country for weeks, driving a truck, a very big, macho guy. And we were going around the table, people were introducing themselves, and he said, he introduced himself as this truck driver, and it turns out that his passion on eBay was collecting Barbie dolls, these little plastic dolls that children have. And he had made. Yes, I know. I was worried about the Barbie reference. And he had made this connection. I want to make sure that His Holiness understands how strange this experience was. Well, maybe something about rubber duckies or something. So he had made this connection with an attorney living in another city who also shared a passion for these dolls. And what was amazing about technology is that it erased the outward difference that Eckhart was talking about, that between this truck driver and this woman in New York who's an attorney, and it let them engage around something that they cared about as human beings without thinking that one was so different from the other. So I think that what the internet and what technology has enabled us to discover is that we have so much more in common with one another than differences. And this diversity creates the power of markets, and I think that diversity is a way to reach peace.
Let's talk a little bit about this process of personal peace. I say this fully aware of how short time is here this morning, but we're here for 3 days, and there are many more conversations to be had. But there was one central question that I wanted, particularly, if I might, Eckhart and His Holiness to comment on, which is the best route to personal peace. In many of your writings, you talk about the importance of reason, of taking control of your mind. And you've embraced a lot of scientific research and scientific methodologies to understand the processes of the mind and how reason is the road to enlightenment. Eckhart, you write explicitly about stopping your mind from getting in the way of enlightenment, at some point you write about thinking as a disease. Do you want to talk about this? I'm very interested because they seem to be, at first glance, to be very different routes to enlightenment. And I'd love your first comments and perhaps ask His Holiness to comment on them.
Thinking, if you can observe it in yourself, that there's a voice in your head and it never stops speaking. That's the thinking, automatic thinking processes that go on. For many people, this automatic thinking that goes on continuously produces a lot of anguish and suffering, because the mind is very critical and the mind is very judgmental, and it interprets things very often in a distorted way, negatively. when you meet other human beings. So you can observe your own mind and you realize there is a voice in my head. Most people are so trapped in the thinking voice that that's their identity. They think that's the false self, that's the me. It's a mind-made self of the memories of me. You get a sense of identity that's mind-made, and we could call that the ego, false self. I think the Buddha's great insight was that the self is an illusion. So the incredible insight 2,600 years ago. So there is the mind potentially can be, and for some people it is, a wonderful instrument if it is used as an instrument. But if the mind uses you, then it becomes mad. So the difference is, can I use my mind, or is the mind using me? So is the mind possessing me? Is it in my head in running my life, which is my old conditioning? So the essential thing is to realize then there is a dimension within myself that is where I'm not thinking, where I'm just present, spacious. Here, stillness, we could call it. There's an inner stillness. Underneath the thinking processes, there is a stillness where you don't become unconscious, you are fully alert, just like a little child. You can see the world without needing always to impose concepts and words on everything you perceive. Clarity. I believe that is one aspect of what the Buddha called emptiness, is this empty, there is an empty space underneath your thinking, there is a vast space. And so if you realize the essence of you are is formless. It's not any mind form or physical form. And then you can use thinking constructively and use your mind. You are no longer at the mercy of your mind. And that is the awakening. And that is what we are all engaged in. Because otherwise we just perpetuate old conditioning. We live the same way that our previous generations have. You can look at families. The same dysfunction in the same family, from grandfather to father, they all treat their children, they beat their children because they were beaten as children, and then their children. So there's no break in that dysfunctional conditioning. So to realize there is a possibility of presence, you can be just present, and you don't always need to be thinking. So you have the two worlds, balance between thinking and not thinking, but not going to sleep, not alert, present, just like a little child. That Jesus said, become like little children if you want to enter the kingdom of heaven. You need to become like, how does a little child look at the world? Spacious. Wonder, everything is alive.
Your Holiness, would you comment on this view?
No. So your explanation, more like philosophy. I think we should look today as a problem of our life, at various levels. In certain level, as you mentioned, sometimes we call thoughtlessness. But that, I think, only for few people. Now we are talking about 6 billion human beings. So thought also important. You see, without sort of thought, then obviously the investigation itself a kind of thought. process of thinking. The investigation is one of the, I think, unique good thing for human being. Now the wrong is, I think the power of investigation or thinking itself something wrong. I don't think, but some other element of the mind. I believe I think the thought process may be shirokcha.
Part of the intelligence dimension.
The intelligence, whether you see they become constructive or destructive, depend on other mental element. That mental element is the dumbedicity.
Those states of mind that has more to do with intention and aspiration and desire.
So here you see two things. The part of sort of brain, sometimes I call like this way, the part of brain that's intelligence, investigation, thinking. Then part of warm-heartedness. So these two things combine. Then our intelligence become constructive. The intelligence carried by negative sort of motivation, destructive emotion, such as anger, hatred, jealousy, then all intelligence become destructive. So when we talk mind, there are so many varieties. So the process of one thought, it involves many different sort of factors. So I want to mention to you one factor. There are many different aspects. Now, my own case, the fundamental level, I'm a human being. Then second level, I'm Tibetan, I'm Asian, Tibetan. Then another level, I'm Buddhist. Then further, I think level, I'm Dalai Lama. Or some people call me demon. So that's the matter. Doesn't matter whatever they say. Some people say God King. So these are nonsense. I think if we look other people on a fundamental level, no differences. Mentally, emotionally, physically, we are same. I think on that level, hardly no reason to fight. Now, second level, see, they say different nationality, different races, different color, and different religion. And even within the community, richer, poorer, educated, uneducated, and also make differences on the basis of their professions. Some are more respect because of some of the professional or high profession. Some will look down because of their work. So, at the secondary level, then a lot of divisions, a lot of barriers. So when we talk about 6 billion human beings, we must talk on the level of we are human beings. That's the top most important. Many man-made problems, I believe, we too much emphasis on the secondary level of differences, of forget the basic oneness of human being. This is how I feel. So therefore, just I mentioned this before, we really now use this intelligence, investigation, thinking. Today's world, the entire 6 billion human beings from different continents, their life very much interdependent, interconnected. So all part of the world is part of we, part of me. So my own happy future, my own successful, peaceful life depend on the rest of the 6 million human beings. So my future depend on the rest of the people, rest of the world. So that's now today's reality. So that, I think that kind of conclusion can develop out of investigation, not just mere compassion. Then another level, see, when we born at the time of our birth, and next few weeks or few months, the main factor of our survival is affection. Mother's affection, child's sight also towards mother. No idea. Then thought, not yet is it developed, so no idea of who is that. But emotion, but biologically, totally remain depend on the mother. So very close sort of feeling, affection, bond. So that's the basis of our survival. And our life started that way. So in our blood, I think, firstly, appreciation of others' affection, always there. Even those who say, I think people who really, without hesitation, kill millions of people, deep inside, they also have this sort of, I don't know, they also, you see, appreciate others' affection. So anyone who appreciate others' affection, automatically, they also have the potential to show affection to others. So this is, I think, basic our nature. So from that viewpoint, I believe human beings' basic nature is more gentleness, more compassionate. Now the scientific sort of finding, more compassionate mind, very good for our health. Constant fear, constant anger is very bad for our health. So that means biologically, our sort of particles of our body goes well with peace of mind, compassionate mind.
Thank you very much.
I came across a lovely saying from your writings where you said, I have a certain amount of affection of affection and compassion towards others. The seed of that did not come from Buddhism, it did not come from religion, it came from my mother. I thought it was lovely. You talked, Reverend Tutu, about the importance of understanding the place of women in this process. I don't particularly want to press you to talk about that, but I did want to give you a moment to talk about this process of finding personal peace. You come from a different religious tradition from Buddhism. Some of the basic precepts are different. I think this conversation here showed how much you have in common. I mean, a lot of your writing is about oneness, isn't it, and sharing what we all have in common. But there are different approaches to that. I mean, do you want to comment just either on the conversation you've heard or your sense of this personal state?
As a mother, I would say that finding personal peace, it's helpful to avoid 2-year-olds with tantrums. But I, by the same token, I do find that our children do have a lot to teach us in terms of how it is that we find personal peace. When we watch children, when we watch what it is that they are easy at, when we watch what it is that gives them joy. Those, just the observation can be a real lesson to us. Watching children at play, watching children when they focus their attention on whatever it is that fully draws their attention, when they forget themselves, that is a gift that we often lose as we get older, the gift of being able to forget ourselves at something, to get lost, engrossed in something. And I think that experience of being engrossed is that place where thought is embodied in a way. The sort of the thought isn't chatter, but it is an embodied experience. Did that make sense? Okay. Can I add my 2 cents on technology, which is that technology is actually generally neutral, and it's all to do with how we employ it. So we can employ technology as a force for good, as a force for drawing us closer together as community, and we can employ it as a way of creating distance between each other, between ourselves and other people. However that's said in English.
However,
yes. Maybe you can help me too.
Just on this, I'm keeping an eye on the clock here because we're okay. We can stay all day, can't we? But His Holiness has to go somewhere else shortly, so I know that we have to wrap up quite soon. Just on this point of passion, there was a terrific book published earlier this year, which I wrote myself. And it's that good, tell you. About this coming together of passion and aptitude. I called it the element, how finding your passion changes everything. And you see it in young children. Children are often drawn to particular things, which they love to do, which define them. But often it's the process of it being institutionalized, especially through education, that detaches them from their talent. And I think it's a big issue for us. So I'd like, in the few minutes remaining, if we could each just say a few words about where we believe this process should begin. Again, it's a precursor to the longer conversations of the next few days. But I think if anything comes through all of the writings and teachings on the table, around the table, it's that life is not linear, it's organic, and everything connects. And therefore, there isn't a single starting point for change, but you have to begin somewhere. For me, a big starting point is education. I know it is for all of the people on the panel. But I'd like to, if you would, just to give us a sense of where your own priorities would be to take this agenda forward from this Peace Summit. And we have prodigious problems to face. I'm involved with others here with a great organization called Free the Slaves. There are currently 27 million people on Earth in slavery. More people than at any time in the history of humanity today. It's not legal, but it's spreading. This question of inhumanity to each other is extraordinary. As you say, the 20th century saw wholesale slaughter. So I think we all want this conversation to be grounded as well as optimistic and hopeful. So where would we begin to move this forward? Where for you are the main priorities? I'm going to come to you, Matthieu, if I may. And then to Pierre, then we'll come back around the table. What are your priorities? What do you think ours should be?
Well, you see, if we assume somehow, as often we find in modern thinking, that fundamentally human nature is selfish. There are many thinkers who say that. This kind of foundation of economy. I mean, there's a lot of things that, well, take for granted that everyone fend for themselves. So if we take that view, then why should we try to teach children altruism and compassion, because it's a lost cause. You know, if we are bound to be selfish in any way, so to recognize that the possibility of goodness, the possibility of altruism, as not just some kind of nice utopic ideal, but as something that is really at the core of our human being. That will encourage us to say, how can we cultivate that in young children? How can we incorporate that in education? And unless we become this awareness of that potential, then why should we bother? And about what was said, to reconcile those two perspectives, yes, our mind can be our best friend or our worst enemy, but investigation in the sense of bridging the gap between the way things appear and the way things are, unless we have a clear idea and we don't superimpose and distort reality, then there's no way we can deal with those problems. For instance, how to apply both in terms of peace and compassion and education. Many philosophers said it's too much to ask to love your enemy. So they confuse here liking someone. You know, you killed 10,000 people, but you know, you're not such a bad guy. Here's a ticket, have a vacation in the Bahamas. So it's not appreciating that. What better wish could you make that may hatred, may cruelty disappear from that person's mind? He's like mad, he's like sick, he's like crazy. So wisdom here is not just a sentimental idea that I can only like those who are nice to me or are nice to others. Compassion and love is not a bonus for those who behave well, and the lack of compassion a punishment. Compassion is about removing the cause of suffering, and hatred and all those are the causes of suffering. So in a way, wisdom and compassion are the two wings of the same bird. So education is so much based on intelligence and information. Those are two tools. With a hammer, you can destroy and you can build. So to find a way, just not like a sort of extraneous thing, but as a core component of education, to bring back human values in a secular way, because otherwise it will not be accepted, but seriously and in depth in the education. Without that, then intelligence can grow and grow and grow, and that leads sometimes to catastrophes.
By the way, we're having we're having a whole session on education of the heart and of creativity on Tuesday with some of the panel members here. I hope you can come to that. But I really believe this profoundly. Our education systems are locked into the old industrial model. And one of the big deficits you see is, for example, the complete absence of the arts in programs of education. Often the very processes that speak most directly to the heart and to compassion. So I hope you join us for that conversation. Pierre, what are your thoughts?
We live in a time where we have many solutions at our disposal that have been proven to help lift people out of poverty, to help give people a sense of dignity. And the work that many wonderful people do in microfinance, for instance, I think leads to personal transformation, one person at a time, by focusing on giving that person the opportunity they need to build their own life. We all believe all people are inherently capable, but not all people have equal opportunity. Our role is to give opportunity to everyone equally. And when a woman in a rural village in India for the first time touches money, for the first time, because in the past she's been not allowed to touch the money. She's reluctant, she's afraid, but when she realizes that she can take a micro loan and she can buy some vegetable seeds, she can plant a garden, and then she can begin to pay back that loan, she develops a sense of her own self and her own dignity as a human being, as someone who can contribute to making her family better and her village better. These tools, it's not just microfinance, there are many tools that focus on individuals, one person at a time, providing dignity, giving someone access to a marketplace, gives them a way to earn a livelihood. And again, that's focused on individual dignity. I mean, that's the type of approach that we take, is one person at a time, creating this opportunity that they need to maximize everyone's inherent capability. And I think that's a great avenue to making the world a better place, and hopefully through personal transformation, one person at a time, discovering that power that they have to contribute to making the world better.
Eckhart, where are your priorities?
I have a suggestion for a new subject for all schools. Actually, the main subject, and all other subjects would become subsidiary to that main subject that is taught. At the moment, not taught very much. The main subject is awareness. Awareness of the child's own emotions, so that the child can deal with his or her emotions, is not always completely taken over by emotions. Awareness of the child can learn to be aware of their own thoughts. The child can learn to be aware of other human beings, of their emotions, of their thoughts, and not equate the emotions with who I am, and not equate my thoughts with who I am, and not equate the other person's emotions with who that person is, or his judgments with who that person is, so that the child from a very early age realizes who he or she is, which is awareness, consciousness itself. Everything else then flows from there.
Final thoughts?
More a question, I think, than a thought, which is, to what end are we educating ourselves, and to what end are we educating our children? What is the point and purpose of the education systems that we have in place, the education systems that we'd like to see put in place? And that might give us the direction of the shift, because clearly there is something missing in what we are learning and teaching, what we are teaching our children as we see violence ratcheting up in various places in the world among young people, and in what we're teaching ourselves as we look at the world and look at our children and look at the ways that we respond to spirals of violence. I love the notion of teaching awareness. I would ask perhaps the next step, which is, now that we are self-aware, what do we want to achieve from that? What is it that we wish for ourselves and for others as a result of that awareness?
Yeah, please. We do have to draw this to a conclusion because His Holiness has another engagement. But this is only, I hope you'll recognize, being a kind of tasting menu for the conversations to come. Any one of these topics would keep us for a long time and should, but I can't imagine there is a more important set of themes, for we as a species and this as a planet, than how to bring about global peace through this process of personal transformation. I think we may be on the brink of an evolutionary step change in humanity, and I see that everywhere. I work a lot in education around the world on issues of educational transformation. It's not about reform, it's about transformation. We have to move from the industrial age to a different
set of principles and ideologies. But it's also true, I believe, in the way we do business. I've been involved in a movement called conscious capitalism, which is about how to create sustainable models of economic practice which are based on humanitarian principles rather than just the kind of blind pursuit of profit. And it's why I think it's been such an interesting panel to have together. But I really feel, if we may, Your Holiness, we should offer you a final few words, not just on what we've talked about, but on this unique occasion in Vancouver, what you hope we may achieve over the next 3 days as we deepen our conversations.
I'm quite sure it's a more serious discussion with, I think, people who have more wider perspective. Then I think we will get some new ideas, I think new insight there. I appreciate this kind of a meeting that indicates our existing sort of pattern now not satisfied. So we find some lacking. So suppose we are trying to, to explore education, generally speaking. Of course, my own sort of knowledge very, very limited in modern education sense. But looks, I feel, generally speaking, education, I think, quite advanced, and technology also quite advanced, but fail to bring real peace. Sometimes this technology and smart brain sometimes helping carrying this destructive sort of, like 2000, because it was like on the September 11th event. And also among the young student, sometimes killing or depression and suicide. These things happen. So that shows something lacking. Whether we can achieve or not, that's a different matter. But it is important to try and discussion and investigate, that I feel. Then perhaps, I think with you here, and also the Governor General is mentioned about women's. So here I have one sort of belief. Maybe some people may call me feminist. I don't know. So that means, you see, in human history, I think millions of years ago, in human society, no idea of leadership, I feel. I think I should ask you, I think these learned people, I don't know. I feel no idea of leadership. Everybody equal, work together, whatever they get, share together. Then eventually population increase. Some mischievous people then start. So the concept of leadership come. Then no education. Therefore, the main sort of quality of leadership is physical strength. So that I believe the male dominance is to start from that. Then eventually education take important role. So then that makes more equal, male and female. But now we are 21st century. It's quite clear. You see, even I think even you see the billionaire, plenty of money, and also because of the money, they're also quite influential. But as an individual person, very unhappy person. I also met some of them. So money also failed to bring inner peace. And those very powerful leaders, in deep inside, I think much anxiety, much fear, much distrust. So their inner peace destroyed. So therefore, now since modern education alone fail to bring inner peace. And the money or wealth also fail to inner peace. And sophisticated technology also, I think, fail to bring inner peace. So now here, we need some effort, more effort, to promote basic human value, that is human compassion, human affection. In that respect, biological factor, female have more sensitivity about others' pain or suffering. A scientist also is saying that. So therefore, I think firstly I want to tell the governor and then all those people here. Now, 21st century, at the time, really we need more effort for promotion of human compassion. In that respect, female have more important role. So therefore, please take more active role.
Can I just say that I think we have to end here, but one of the comments His Holiness made a while ago was that, I think as you put it, to be born a human being is a rare event in any case, and we should use the opportunity as beneficially as possible. I believe we should, and I hope the Vancouver Peace Summit will help us all to think more deeply about how to do that. Can I, on your behalf, thank the members of the panel, and especially His Holiness the Dalai Lama for hosting this.
But that I do not really have the capability to actually translate these words into concrete action. So I think that you were hoping that I could do a better job. So I think that in this gathering, in the next couple of days, we have Your Holiness here, and we have some very compelling people from around the world who are much more capable than me, and I think that I'm hoping that this gathering here would allow the chance for all of us to put our ideas together and collaborate and actually find some way to translate the idea of compassion into very specific and concrete action that will make a difference to people around the world. So what I would like to do now is to show you a video of the Governor General of Canada, Matthieu Ricard. She has created a video message for all of you. So if we are ready for the showing of the video, let's start it, please.
Your Holiness, Your Worship, Mr. Chan, distinguished guests, chers amis, c'eût été un honneur pour moi de me retrouver en votre compagnie. Vous qui brillez par vos actions éclairées et qui nous inspirez par vos idées des plus lumineuses. It would have been an honor to be in the midst of such a dazzling constellation of global change agents. Your presence in Vancouver is a glowing testament to Victor Chan's vision and his generosity of spirit, which were instrumental in making this gathering of hearts and minds possible. Like the brightest stars in the night sky, you help to guide us in our journey to a place where the human race finds joy in its common humanity and finds unity in its unconditional love for peace and justice. I can imagine that the concert hall must be humming with the prophetic melodies of hope, compassion, and togetherness. It would have been music to my ears since I have always believed that international gatherings like these are crucial because they encourage us to renew a spirit of peace within. They invite us to develop innovative solutions. They remind us that we can no longer work in isolation from one another. Le temps des solitudes est passé. Il est temps dorénavant de retrouver nos valeurs et nos aspirations communes. Il est temps de regarder le monde autrement, et j'oserais dire avec des yeux plus humains. Il est temps aussi de créer une feuille de route citoyenne pour la paix dans le monde. The time for solitude has passed. Now is the time to rediscover the values and aspirations we share. It is time to see the world through a new, dare I say, a more humane lens. It's time to create a new civic roadmap for world peace. Yes, daunting challenges lie ahead. Every day, women and men are slaughtered and maimed in armed conflicts. Every hour, young women are submitted to extreme forms of sexual terror. Every minute, children are forced into armed combat, sexual slavery, or even drug dealing by criminal groups. Faced with these heart-wrenching realities, it is easy to seek solace in the opium of defeatism, fatalism, and indifference. For a feeling of powerlessness can dampen our sense of moral duty. It can numb our determination to act, and it can lull our capacity to empathize. That is why it is imperative that we inoculate ourselves with the planetary resolve to resist the everyone for themselves and their clan mentality. To reject the spurious claims of an imminent clash of civilizations. To quell the insidious forces of sectarianism and fundamentalisms of all stripes. Luckily, we are not alone on this journey. For every person in the room stand thousands, if not millions, of people around the world who, in the shadow of anonymity, are risking everything to chip away at the walls of hatred, indifference, and fear that plague their communities. Here, I must pay a special tribute to the women around the world who are defying the odds to make a rousing ode to peace and justice in their conflict-ridden communities. Because women are conscious that life is our most precious asset. They are prepared at any cost to mobilize and take action for their children and for humanity. No one anywhere can afford to exclude women in any campaign for peace. Excluding women is a recipe for failure. That is why I'm pleased to see that the inclusion of women will be at the heart of your deliberations. You have a unique opportunity to dream big, to join your strength, and most importantly, to transform your ideas into concrete action for change. Please be inspired. The world is counting on you. Peace is within our grasp. I thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Now I have the great pleasure of introducing a very old friend of mine for many years. He is Tom Beach, the president of the Fetzer Institute in a rather strange town called Kalamazoo. The Fetzer Institute is, in my mind, one of the most compelling, most interesting, and also most unusual institution in the U.S. Because their whole mandate is to foster something that is rather difficult to grasp and a bit nebulous. Their whole idea is to promote the idea of loving kindness and forgiveness. So this is one of those rare institutions that is speaking to all of us through the foundation of our own psychology as well as our spiritual roots. And they have dedicated all their programming, their effort towards achieving and fostering love and forgiveness among all of us. So I think Tom Beach is here, and I believe that he has some money to give away also in the next little while. Tom Beach of Fetzer Institute.
Thank you, Victor. I just celebrated my 70th birthday about 2 weeks ago, so I'm a little sensitive about being referred to as your old friend. Victor is my young friend. It's a great pleasure, and we are delighted and grateful to be part of this important Peace Summit. And we're glad that we can be here with all of you. I want to begin by saying good morning. Oh boy. If the Archbishop were here, he would say, "Oh, come friends, you can do better than that." So let's try it again. Good morning. Good morning. Now we're getting somewhere. The next 30 minutes will be a time of great joy. We will recognize the life and work of two extraordinary people, and we also have the opportunity to reconnect with the power of love and forgiveness in our own lives. From the beginning of our thinking about the Fetzer Prize for Love and Forgiveness, we knew that we should honor people whose very lives stand for love and forgiveness. We wanted this prize to recognize people who live with the reality of fear and violence, and yet are inspiring examples of both the promise and the power of love, forgiveness, and compassion. We consulted many people from all over the world, asking them who would they nominate for such a prize, and two names stood out in every single conversation: His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Emeritus Desmond Tutu. Thank you, Your Holiness, for being with us today. We know how much your friend Archbishop Tutu wanted to be here in person to share this time with you. But as Victor mentioned a few minutes ago, he's suffering from a painful back injury. I'm not going to hazard a guess as to whether it comes from dancing, but I know it's painful, and it's left him unable to travel for several weeks. But we're truly delighted that the Archbishop's daughter, Reverend Mpho Tutu, is with us today to accept the prize on her father's behalf. It's wonderful to see you again. Before we make the formal presentation of the prize, we'd like to show you a short video tribute from a few friends and fellow Nobel Laureates.
They are an explosion of joy. They're an explosion of enthusiasm, happiness, of great love. These persons give us immense enthusiasm. They radiate great inspiration. They joke, they laugh.
I've lost count of the numerous times that I've been with His Holiness. In fact, we joke a lot together now because he loves Irish jokes. And the last time I was in Dharamsala with us, we were doing a peace jam there with him. I said, you know, Your Holiness, it's about time you married me. Oh, this is beautiful, I love you. I think I need someone a little younger.
I always see a positive energy in Desmond Tutu. He is a very happy person.
همونطوری که گفتید
As you know, he has a sense of humor.
He says that the secret to winning the Nobel Peace Prize is to have an easy pronounced name, to have a big nose,
You must have a large nose.
and to have sexy legs.
That's him.
I take issue with his issue about his legs. I wouldn't call them beautiful. In Bali, I saw him in shorts and a rain slicker tied around his head. I would not think he'd be a cover boy for GQ in that outfit. He looks fabulous in anything else, however.
Well, that's my Desmond. I mean, I absolutely adore him. For me, he's a wee spiritual bubble. He just goes around landing on people, you know. And I honestly don't know what's hit them. He has a profound spirituality. Something that I would love to achieve someday. I want what he's got. I want his kind of deep understanding of the world and what makes it tick.
What I admire about Desmond Tutu is that he cut the circle of violence in South Africa because this circle had to be cut.
The Dalai Lama is a person with great humanitarianism. He has a profound spirituality. He continues to be a voice for the right of the Tibetan people to their land, their religion, their lives. And despite all that, the Dalai Lama opened a space of understanding at the international level with other people, with other religions. He is a man who's trying to unite the human family.
When all that awfulness was happening to his Buddhist monks, and I wrote him a letter and I said, I dream someday of you walking into your own country with a great big smile on your face. We owe him that.
So I just want to first thank Reverend Mpho Tutu, who is here today with us. We were very much hoping that Archbishop Desmond Tutu will be here with us today. And I must say, he tried very hard to do so, but he put his back out some days ago. So it's very difficult for him to travel from Cape Town to Vancouver. So I'm just delighted that his daughter, who is much better looking than the Archbishop, is here with us. The Archbishop, as you know, is 78 years old now, I think. And all his life, he really loves young people, and he loves loud music as well. And he loves dancing. And I have often told him that he should stop acting like a teenager and start behaving like a holy man. But of course he doesn't listen, so I think a couple of weeks ago he was dancing away and having a good time, and he put his back out. So we are just delighted that you are here today with us, Reverend Tutu. I'm so grateful that His Holiness the Dalai Lama is with us here today. I am still trying to come to terms with the idea that he is now here in Vancouver 3 times in 5 years. I think all of us in Vancouver, and even myself who live on Bowen Island rather than Vancouver, are really grateful to have His Holiness here the 3rd time in 5 years. And of course, now that he's an honorary citizen of Canada, he should be coming anytime he wishes. And I think that they still require him to have a visa to come here this time, though. So I don't know about the honorary citizens. Your Holiness, the idea of this gathering started a few years ago when we had this conversation. And I remember you were not very pleased with me because you said to me that you come here and I talk a lot about the idea of compassion and making a difference in the world and so on.